but not more tragic than the genocides in Armenia, Rwanda, Cambodia, Bosnia, Guatemala, or Darfur. Or one of the biggest genocides in history that took place where we're standing, the extermination of Native Americans. Most people didn't even know of Genocide Rwanda until the Oscar-nominated film Hotel Rwanda in 2004. That is the power of film, its ability to give visibility, but also the equally dangerous side of altering the perception of history and who and what we remember. The headline read, Philip Seymour Hoffman, age 46, found dead in New York City apartment from apparent drug overdose. He will be remembered for his role as Truman Capote in the 2000 film which won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. So why all of this matters? Because if we want to understand why certain people and events are erased or forgotten from history, we have to make sure we know the structures of power involved in remembering. A bullet is fired, it hits no one. A bullet is fired, it hits Benazir Bhutto. A bullet is fired, it hits Mahatma Gandhi. A bullet is fired, it hits Malaya Yousafzai. A bullet is fired, it hits John F. Kennedy. A bullet is fired, it hits Martin Luther King Jr. Which one do we remember? It is not the bullet that kills, but the hole that is left behind. But we're here to talk about the best erasure of an activist probably in the history of the United States, excluded from the books, the records, and not part of any official history, perhaps until last year when Obama granted him the Presidential Award, Medal Award. Excluded until today from the same museum that we're standing in. I heard about Bayard Rustin in 2009. You see, we share the same birthday, which psychologically gives me a feel that I'm more connected to him. We were both born in March 17th. My ex-boyfriend sent me a link to his small YouTube video, Brother Outsider, and I spent years researching him. Why? Because he was gay, he was a person of color, and he was an activist, all of which I identify with. Then 2 years ago, I came to Greensboro, and I realized all the relationships that Bayard Rustin had to North Carolina. I had never been in the South, and I didn't know anything about the forms of racism and homophobia experienced here. I came to do a residency at Elsewhere, which resulted in the film Intersection that was screened last night at Guildford. And I learned something new, that oppression is like an endemic plant. It never grows in the exact same way anywhere in the world. It nourishes from different sources of hate, it's feet with that hate, and its roots can go back for centuries. So we can never assume that we're experts or any form of oppression except our own. Never to assume that what the other has gone through. And I don't mean this as a form of separating my struggles from your struggles, of how have been oppressed, or to identify our forms of oppressions as equal, but rather find this empathy and respect and suffering for the suffering of others. As Audre Lorde states in her book Sister Outsider, which I thought it was interesting because the name, those of us who stand outside of the circle of this society's definition of acceptable, those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference, those of us who are poor, who are lesbians, who are black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to stand alone, unpopular and sometimes reviled, and how to make common cause of those others identified as outside the structures in order to define and seek a world in which we all flourish. It is learning to take our difference and make them strengths. I don't pretend to know what it's like to grow in the South, because I grew in Mexico City, or to be openly gay in the 1940s like Bayard Rustin did, but I do have the immense respect for those who paved the way so I can talk in this place with my chin up without denying any of my identities. So, why Bayard is not remembered? I think there's three elements. He held too many minority cards that excluded him through time from the recognition he deserved. Being gay was his first card of exclusion, as we saw in the film, but he always chose the movement. He stepped back on several occasions, not because of lack of courage, but because of recognizing that the struggle was bigger than himself. If his defeat meant the victory of the struggle, then he was willing to retreat, to disappear. Later on, after the gay liberation movement, he would have been given the credibility for his actions. But let's not forget he was also associated with the Communist Party, which carried him into another dark night of exclusion, past his death in 1987 until the Berlin Wall fell in 1990. But we all know that fear of communism didn't end it with that. By that point, he was erased long enough so people have forgotten. I came to this museum 2 years ago, thinking that I would be able to research more about Bayard, and because elsewhere is just a few blocks down the road. And to my surprise, there wasn't anything about Bayard Rustin in this museum. When I talked to the director, his answer was, we don't have space to commemorate everyone. That has done something for the civil rights movement. If we did, we wouldn't be able to walk through the museum. I was furious. Yet Bayard Rustin, as we see from this movie, was not just anyone. He was one of the main pillars of the civil rights movement, and I must admit, I was really mad. I'm tired of people being erased from history, especially when I identify with their struggles. I was angry at a system that I thought betrayed me. But to be honest, it fueled my desire to make the film, which utilizes his own words from speeches, articles, quotes, interviews, essays, and love letters. Because when we think of our immortalized heroes, perhaps there's always a certain quote that strikes our minds and sticks to it. So I thought of using his words as a way to begin remembering him. Words like injury to one is injury to all. This comes full circle, because 2 years later, I'm talking in that exact same site that fueled the entire project. Perhaps a step towards having a space for him in history among the rest who are remembered, and I hope the museum is also listening. History is unavoidable, and in the end, we choose who we remember: the martyr, the saint, the tyrant, the bomber, the victim, the dictator, the fighter, the crucified, the activist, the Nobel Prize, the pop star, the poet, the actor, the writer, our friends, our heroes. To finish with one of my boyfriend's lyrics from his song Smoke and Mirrors, it says, "And vanishing tricks are only good when you reappear somehow in the end."